Hello, everyone. I am Pooja, CEO and co-founder of GoTo, and welcome back to this wonderful series today, which is called From Science to Support, a conversation with Dr. Amy Beckley, founder of Proov. So let me introduce her first. So today's guest is someone who turned her personal journey, personal struggle into a scientific innovation. And in doing so, she's helping thousands and thousands of families to unlock the power of knowledge on their path to life. Now, I'm incredibly honored to welcome Dr. Emmy. She's a PhD scientist, fertility warrior, and the founder and CEO of Proov, a revolutionary hormone testing platform that's transforming the way we understand ovulation, progesterone, and the science of conception. So, welcome, Dr. Emmy, and I am so glad that you could spare some time and talk with our audience today, mainly to understand that the science of conception, your own personal journey, and how you found Proov and how it is actually helping people in conceiving. And at the same time, making it very convenient because they can do this test at home and don't have to worry about sending it to lab or going to lab. So, Amy, I really would appreciate if you can share your journey, how this entire Proov stuff.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. I am a PhD scientist. I've studied hormones a long time. I've always loved science and learning about what happens to the body under disease states. And I was doing breast cancer progression before, and then I got married and we came off birth control and we started to try to have a baby and had a horrible time. I've had 19 years of school and never really learned about my menstrual cycle, my hormones, anything I could do. And when we struggled, I realized that the educational gap between women and getting pregnant was so big that I, really found a gap in this. And so when I was going through it, I was charting my hormones. I was using ovulation tests online, tracking my temperature, and I just wasn't getting pregnant. And then I finally did get pregnant, and I ended up having an early miscarriage and went to the doctor at that point and said, what's going on? I find this is very much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And I was surprised that they said, well, you haven't been trying long enough. You have to try a year. You're not old enough. I was only 28 at the time. You haven't had enough miscarriages. You have to have 3 miscarriages to get this advanced testing. And so long story short is the journey to my first child involved 2 rounds of IVF, endometriosis surgery, 3 years of infertility, 7 miscarriages, and it was horrible. It was horrible. But then my journey to my second child was couple conversations with my doctor of why did IVF work and me trying at home didn't work, and a medication called progesterone that I would take after ovulation, which is a standard part of an IVF procedure. 2 months. It was night and day. It was this horrible thing that I had no education, no tools, no access to care until I was just so far into my journey versus having the education, having the resources, and then actually knowing what was wrong and then kind of fixing it and getting pregnant naturally. And so I felt like we needed better ways to help women, help couples understand their bodies. The only thing that women really had access to was, here's your fertile days. Here's an app that tells you your fertile window, have intercourse on this time period. There wasn't really very many, at-home semen analysis tests at that point either. And what I found the hard way is if you've been trying over 6 months, it's most likely not a timing issue, it's something else. And so I wanted to fill that gap by creating this product called Proov that would allow women access, couples, men, women, this information so that they can understand, do I have sperm? Is it swimming? Do I have eggs? How many eggs do I have? Am I timing intercourse? Or am I inseminating the right way? Am I even ovulating? Do I make enough progesterone to support implantation and pregnancy? These are all key things that I don't feel like we have to wait to talk to a doctor. We should do this on day 1 or whenever we're ready to do something like that.
Yeah, and I didn't get that part that you should have 3 miscarriage and then you should be worried. I mean, that knowledge, one miscarriage itself, is it enough to understand that what is going on, right? That was shocking for me to know that like people tell you that okay, you wait this many time it happens, and then we will have a conversation, then we will have the test. Thank you for sharing it, Amy. This is going to be very much motivating for so many people who are going through the same journey. So how did you start it, Proov? And like this was definitely the motivation behind it. So how did that journey start?
So I first figured out, medical industry is basically not trying to cure or prevent diseases. They just find solutions to fix the problem. And so I found out that the root cause of my infertility was I wasn't making enough progesterone after ovulation. And so I would release an egg, and you need to have enough of this hormone to support implantation and pregnancy. And my hormone levels were just dropping too soon before I had time, the baby had time to implant and start making more progesterone, of my body to make more progesterone. And so I really felt like the gap was the diagnostic test, was the knowledge, was the ability to understand problems so that we could either go to doctors sooner, to know what the problem is, try to fix the problem. And I I'm a scientist. I went, into the medical research, and I looked at all the publications, and I said, all right, how do we make this so you don't have to go to a lab, you could do this at home? And I found out that there was this way you could do it with urine testing, so you didn't have to get a blood test. And the key was tracking your hormones over time. So instead of getting a single blood test, because hormones go like this, you would test in urine daily to get patterns, to understand, are they remaining elevated? Are they dropping too soon? Do they never get high enough? Just more information. And so we actually launched a crowdfunding campaign, kind of like a Kickstarter type thing, where we said, here's our idea. We want to make this test as a urine-based test. We need this much money to get it into production. And a lot of couples donated to the campaign. We got enough money, and we made the prototypes and then sold them. And that's just kind of how we've built. And so we started by just measuring the urine metabolite of progesterone, and now we measure all 4 hormones across the cycle to understand hormone balances. Does she have eggs? Is the fertile, like a whole big analysis of the menstrual cycle, as well as a male test that helps him identify, does he have sperm? Is it moving the right direction? Which are the 2 main factors in being able to father a child.
Okay, that was wonderful journey, and like thank you for like covering like this whole spectrum of tests, which will help somebody to like cover the entire journey from even like thinking of becoming pregnant to like becoming pregnant. So that is, I think, your product range cover all of those kind of things. So Amy, so I would like to ask that if suppose, because many of our audience are lesbian couple or single mother by choice, or say people who are facing fertility problem, if they want to start like journey from the very beginning, can you walk us through like what the journey should look like and what kind of monitoring they should do throughout the journey? If you can let us know what all you have, that will help us understand them that thing, and also very importantly, the science behind that why it is important to track certain things and what kind of pattern they should look into it. So yeah.
Yeah. So the first question I would ask is how old this woman or this couple is and how many children they want to have. Fertility rates decline the older we get. As a society, we are waiting longer because we need more time to finish our schooling and set up our careers and all that stuff. And it just happens to be that we're waiting till 35, 38, something like that, to start a family. Natural fertility pretty much ends at about 43 or 44. And so if you're getting to that age, you should go to a doctor almost immediately and make sure everything, you might need to get IVF or something like that, just because natural fertility just nosedives at that point. I'm not saying it's not possible to get pregnant, it's just very, very difficult. And I wouldn't waste time with anything else other than going straight to a clinic. But if you're under 43, more in the ages of like 30 to 43, there's just a increased prevalence of infertility. 1 out of 5 couples deal with infertility. That's how common it is. And so the biggest advice I would give to anybody, especially if they're over the age of 30, is to do fertility testing, especially if you don't have the equipment within your relationship and you have to purchase or go out and resource other pieces of it. So before you get a donor, a sperm donor, definitely do the testing yourself. But there are basically 5 key things to look at. One is you need to look at your eggs to figure out how many eggs you have left. The second one is you need to have sperm. We can take that one out of the equation right now. The third one is you need the uterine environment to be receptive to receive the embryo, and you need to make sure you're actually releasing the egg and then having, a healthy pregnancy. And so by testing with something like Proov, so we have this kit, it's called the Proov Complete Kit, and it tests the entire cycle for women. So the first thing we do is we look at her egg count. And so you are born with as many eggs as you're going to have, and every month more and more eggs get released or they die off during the process. And so at some point you won't have enough eggs left that your body will stop to ovulate, and that's called menopause. But also your eggs get damaged by the sun, things you eat, exercise, just life in general. They just get damaged. And so about, again, 43, 44 is natural end of fertility. But some people can lose their eggs at 30, at 35, at 40. We don't know. And so first thing you want to know is, do you have eggs? So you can do an at-home test like Proov. You can go get an AMH draw at your physician. You can get an ultrasound, look at your follicle count, but just an idea of, how many eggs you have left, your ovarian reserve. The next thing we do is you look at hormone ratios. So your ovaries are very quiet in the beginning of the cycle. And then the brain sends a signal down to the ovaries and says, okay, it's time to make an egg. And the egg will mature. There will be an egg that's in a follicle, and it will mature and it will ovulate and release. And so you need enough of this hormone called estrogen to ripen this follicle. And then your LH is what will cause that to release. So that's the hormone most ovulation tests measure is the LH hormone, luteinizing hormone. And then after ovulation, your body will produce a hormone called progesterone. This will create a good environment in your uterus to allow for implantation. And so if you have a regular cycle, you could be ovulating, could be releasing hormones, releasing eggs, but they could be not in the right ratios or not enough or not long enough. And that could impact your fertility. So women, hormone imbalance is the leading cause of infertility. So PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome, 1 out of 10 women have. Endometriosis, 1 out of every 10 women have. And what it does is it cuts off the signals from your brain to your ovaries so they can't work. And so your brain's sending down these signals to your ovaries are trying to ovulate and release eggs, and they just can't do it. And they get cysts instead of ovulating, and then you can get like withdrawal bleeds. And so you really want to make sure your cycle is working. And so doing a test like this that goes through how many eggs do I have, my full fertile window, we call it the implantation window, or when that embryo would implant, are my hormones in balance? You get a nice report, like a report card on your hormones that say everything is in range, everything's good, or you know what, no, it's not in range, it's not good. And then if it's good, you're like, great, we screened it, we're good to go, everything's in working order, then you can go out and find a donor and go out to actually conceive. If there is something off, you can take the results to your doctor. We could suggest things like ovulation induction medications, Clomid, luteal phase progesterone, which is what I took, and I was able to conceive. But basically, you're getting access to this information before you actually have to deal with infertility and get so frustrated and spend so much money and waste so much time that a good doctor could do after you've been struggling for a year. So I would definitely make sure you check your fertility before you go out and try to conceive.
Yeah, and like you will have like this scientific data that okay, what exactly is going through your cycle, and then you can get like more peace of mind, as well as you can like rule out certain things that okay, fine, these things are working fine. What can be the other factor which is not working, right? So that is the insight which will give you a lot of clarity, peace of mind, and etc. So I want to go a little bit deeper into what you just explained. So say, what is like the right time to test this ovarian reserve thing? So like, if somebody is ready to get pregnant, is there a day in their cycle where they should do this testing? Please walk us through for each and every test because that will be very helpful.
Yeah. Ovarian reserve testing is done in the beginning. And so our test measures cycle day 5, 7, and 9 to look at the pattern of hormones in your cycle. If you're going to go get blood work, it's typically called cycle day 3 blood work. So it's the beginning of your cycle. And this just shows you what's happening into your ovaries as it's quiet at the beginning of your cycle to see how many kind of eggs are waiting to help, go down that ovulation process. So yeah, beginning of the cycle.
And then, so once you do that test, somebody is doing that test. Now comes to the ovulation test case, right? So what would be the right time to start that ovulation test in order to get like really nice precision ovulation window? So what would be the time when they should start, to what time, and like how often that should be done?
Yeah, so there's two types of ovulation tests. There's one that gives you a 2-day fertile window, and then the other one that gives you a 6-day fertile window. And each has its own utility. Some people like more days, some people don't. But the one that gives you two fertile days, it measures a hormone called LH or luteinizing hormone. That one should be done starting probably cycle day 8, cycle day 10. If you have a really long cycle, it's cycle end date. So say you have a 40-day cycle and you minus 18 days from it, that's when you should start. But these things are fairly cost effective on the internet. We have one, it's called Predict, and each box has 15 strips. It can sometimes be hard to catch the surge, and so we recommend doing it twice a day. So 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. are probably the best 2 times to test your hormones. Yeah, that's typically when you see it, the highest concentration in the urine. If you want to
10 a.m. So it is 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Because like I know like majority of the people, whenever they do first time in the morning, that be their test for like hormone testing. But this is like new knowledge. It's 10 a.m. and 6 p.m.
Yes. So the brain will surge LH in the morning. Like at night when you're sleeping, it'll surge LH, but it's in your body, it's in your blood. It needs time to go into the urine and metabolize throughout the day. And so if you're doing it first morning urine, you're probably missing it because it needs time to process and excrete in your urine. So that's why you should do it 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Those are, yeah. And then we have this other kit that does the 6-day fertile window. So this one measures estrogen as well as LH. We actually measure a different form of LH that is more consistently found in first morning urine than the other form. And this is a little bit complicated, but you're nailed it, where if you're going to measure estrogen and progesterone metabolites in urine, you need to do it first thing in the morning on that urine. But then again, you miss the LH signal because that's metabolized later. And so we developed this test. We just want women to test once a day, once a day, once a day, once a day, first morning urine, that's it. And so we measure a different form of LH that can be seen in first morning urine. And so you don't have to worry about missing that.
And so till when do they like should keep testing this ovulation?
Yes.
When do they know that, okay, fine, this is the time? Because I know it's either 16 hours window and like it's like really small window, right? So that's why people want to know that, because that these kind of things really makes people stress out. Oh my God, ovulation is like already, is it past? Is it not past? What did I do wrong, right?
Yes. Yeah. So if you're using the LH test, which is just the standard ovulation test, you're going to ovulate about 12 to 36 hours after you see your first positive test. But studies have shown that up to 30% of women actually ovulate before the LH test is positive. And that's because it's positive in your brain and your ovary sees that signal first before your urine does. And so depending on when you tested that day, how long it took you to process it, how long it's been in your system, you might have actually ovulated before you got that positive test. And so that's where knowing a longer fertile window is important. And so when we do this test, we look for estrogen and LH. So when your egg is maturing in the ovary, it starts producing estrogen. So the bigger it gets, the more estrogen it produces. So you'll see a surge in estrogen in your hormones to open the fertile window, which typically is about 3 or 4 days on average before the LH will surge. And then you have the LH surge, which is at 2 days. So you now have 6 days instead of the 2 days. And so for me, if I waited till the positive LH test, I had missed it. So I'm a fast surger. So I would always have to be like, okay, well, if I surge on cycle day 13 last cycle, my most fertile day is actually cycle day 11. So the next cycle, I would have intercourse on the 11, like cycle day 11, and not wait till 13 when the LH surged. So that one, I want one more question, one more answer for this positive LH test just tells you might ovulate. You might, maybe. The problem is a lot of women with PCOS or endometriosis won't actually ovulate from one of these surges. They'll get a false surge, a false positive. So that's where the PDG test comes in, or the progesterone test, is it will confirm you've actually ovulated. So if you're looking on this chart, this hormone that goes up here is the progesterone. So you enter your fertile window, your estrogen goes up, your LH surges, then your progesterone goes up and it stays up. And so on this kit, we can actually tell you the end of your fertile window by showing, hey, look, your egg released, your progesterone is going up because we see the PDG increasing. That confirms you've ovulated and it closes your fertile window. Whereas this test won't confirm you've ovulated. It won't close your fertile window. You just assume your body did what it was supposed to do, which a lot of times it doesn't. Especially if you're over the age of 30, if you have a BMI over 30, if you've been trying over 6 months, it's probably a good thing to make sure you're actually ovulating, releasing eggs.
So I go a little bit back. So when you say that your LH surge, so as per I think based upon many other kids, people say that once it surge and when it starts dropping, that is exactly your ovulation window. So yeah, any insights on that?
I don't know if I believe that. There's some companies that'll put your highest LH as your peak day and not the first time it was over a certain threshold.
Yeah, exactly. That is true. So they put your highest LH as your peak day.
Yeah.
As soon as you see it dropping, they say that this is your ovulation window.
Yeah, so we actually there's a paper out there that we looked at where it looks at what is the threshold of LH that actually will induce ovulation at the highest rate. And some women will ovulate at an LH of 15, which is lower than a positive test. Some won't ovulate till 40, which is above a positive test. But most women will ovulate the first time LH hits 25, which is our definition of a positive test. Women are not created equal. We all have our own biology, and even cycle 1 and cycle 3 could be different depending on what it is that we're doing that. But science says, the first time LH goes above 25, she will most likely ovulate. But we'll call it 84% of women fit in that category. And so if you're an early ovulator and you only had to get to 15, then it doesn't matter. You've already ovulated before it hit this. That's why I think it's important to also track the PDG, the progesterone, because sometimes you'll see the progesterone going up and then your LH comes up and you're like, but I already ovulated back here. And then you kind of just move your fertile window back and say, okay, this is when I need to inseminate or have intercourse, because by the time I waited for this to happen, I had already ovulated, released that egg. So, I wouldn't trust apps to get it right because they're going off of historicals or what they think is right or whatever. So monitoring hormones and looking at your own unique patterns and getting the data from yourself is so powerful because we're all different and all cycles are different.
So if anybody is trying to conceive, you said that 6 day window is a better chance because you are trying your maximum time. Let's say you are inseminated once a day in those 6 days would really, really increase your chance of getting pregnant in nutshell, right? Because you have longer window, all of those fluctuation or whatever is happening is in that window will give somebody really good chance.
Yes and no. There's typically about 6 days a month or per cycle that a woman is fertile, and so an insemination on one of those 6 days could result in pregnancy. That's all what the fertile window is. It doesn't say you have to have intercourse, you have to inseminate all 6 days. You actually might be better if you don't. So if you have male factor infertility, you shouldn't do it every single day. You should do every other day or once every third day. The other one would be cervical mucus. So the reason that a woman is fertile for 6 days is because if she has fertile cervical mucus, this is a excretion that the cervix has that creates a good environment for sperm to be able to survive and thrive in the reproductive tract until the egg comes out to meet the sperm. And so if she has a good healthy amount of estrogen, she will produce a good healthy amount of cervical mucus, and she can have intercourse or inseminate 4 days before she ovulated, and she still has a chance at conception. So, the other thing is, if you don't have good cervical mucus, you want to maybe just try this one because, 4 days before, yeah, that's why I said, like, it's different, you just want the two most fertile days. Or if, your donor, the magic donor is amazing and he knows he's amazing and he's very expensive, once is enough. You don't have to do it 6 times, 5 times, once, maybe 2 if you really, really want to is enough.
So I think this will really give them like proper insights into what is going on, and then they can decide what time they want to do insemination. Now let's talk about more on progesterone, because like I think not enough people talk about progesterone and like the importance of that. So can you explain a little bit how exactly the pattern happens from the time of ovulation to the conceiving time or end of the cycle?
Yeah. I thought of one more thing. I want to talk about the fertile window, and then we'll go to the progesterone part.
Yeah.
A lot of couples feel that if they've inseminated or they've had intercourse in their fertile window and they haven't gotten pregnant, that it's a timing issue, that they need to go find another device or a thing because it's going to be more accurate at finding the window. If you've timed intercourse correctly, it's about a 20% chance each cycle. And so at the end of 5 or 6 cycles, if you're not getting pregnant with well-timed intercourse, you should look outside of just the timing issue because it's probably not timing. So I've seen that's a mistake a lot of times. Well-timed is not using an app that magically knows your fertile window. Well-timed is, you're using ultrasound guidance, you're using hormones. Those are the 2 best ways to do it. But yes, timed intercourse. Don't think it's a timing issue. If you've well timed it for 6 months, you're still not successful. Look outside that issue. So back to progesterone. So when you release an egg, the ovary will create a corpus luteum, which is the follicle, like basically like the eggshell, so to speak, that the egg popped out of, that will now make progesterone. Progesterone is what's needed to stabilize the uterine lining and make it receptive or sticky for the embryo to implant to have a pregnancy. And at any time, during this process of getting and staying pregnant, your progesterone goes down, it can cause infertility, it can cause miscarriage, it can cause preterm birth. So progesterone is a hormone that needs to remain elevated the entire pregnancy. And so when you release an egg, progesterone is really low, and then it starts kind of building. By 7 days after ovulation, this is when you want to have really high, robust progesterone levels, and you want them to remain high until the embryo has a chance to implant. So I actually have this little cartoon guy. This is your little egg. So this is your uterus. This is your eggs. When the egg pops out, sperm actually swims up the uterus through the fallopian tube and meets it at the point where it comes out of the egg, and it fertilizes it here most of the time. And so then this fertilized egg has to go all the way down the fallopian tube, down this canal to implant somewhere along one of these walls of the uterine environment. This journey takes on average 7 to 10 days. If this egg's on its journey and the ovary thinks, hey, there's no pregnancy, the uterine lining is going to slough off and you're going to get your next menstrual cycle, your period. But if a pregnancy did implant, it's going to send a signal back to the brain, which is the HCG hormone, so what turns your positive pregnancy test positive, that says, we're pregnant. like keep making progesterone, don't stop making progesterone, keep the uterine lining because we need to maintain it. And so you have a positive pregnancy test, you have a positive pregnancy, you don't get your period, all that stuff. And so it is important that your progesterone is high because that's what controls this. If it drops, then you're gonna get your period. In my case, my progesterone levels are really high. And then at about 8 or 9 days after I released the egg, my progesterone levels would drop and I'd get my period. Problem is, it didn't give it enough time for this egg to go down here and implant. And so when Proov measures progesterone in the urine, it measures 7, 8, 9, and 10 days after ovulation. We're looking at sustained levels to give that egg enough time to fertilize and get down to the uterus to have a nice implantation to basically rescue the uterus from going through another period.
So in the case where the egg meets sperm and the embryo is like traveling, you should get like constant high level of progesterone in that window. How many days you need to measure your progesterone? What if like the egg did not like meet the sperm? So how do people monitor it and not get scared that what happened? Did it like get like did the pregnancy happen or not happen? Because this is like I feel it's tricky, but please clarify. I might have misunderstood.
Yeah. I think I understand the question. And I've always wanted there to be some magical tool to know that if we fertilized or not. And there's not yet that I know. But when you release the egg, it takes about 7 days to build up enough progesterone in your system. And then we test from 7 through 10. So it's 4 day period. This is when implantation will happen in about 95% of women, is that 7 to 10 day range. And so we just want to make sure we have a high level and we're maintaining it so the uterine environment is as good as it could be if an embryo was fertilized and isn't about to implant. Because what you don't want to happen is you spend all this time and maybe cost creating this fertilized embryo, and then by the time it gets down to where the uterus is, if the uterus is not ready to receive it, you're not going to get pregnant. You're going to have unsuccessful try. And so we want to make sure that that uterus is ready to be receptive in a healthy environment for, if it did happen to come down and do that. What we don't know is what's the percentage of fertilizations that don't implant. We don't know. All we know is 20% of cycles are successful each time, which means they fertilized and they implanted and the whole thing. We don't know. We don't have any tests to tell us how many fertilized but didn't implant.
In total, whoever is going to use that, they will be testing progesterone 4 times, 7 to 10 days. Okay. And that is where we want to know that the progesterone should be like in the range, whatever it would be. And if it is not in the range, then it means we have some problem with the progesterone level staying high. Suppose somebody tested like this whole set of things for one side, okay? And unfortunately, maybe it didn't happen. So for how many cycles you suggest that they should like keep continuing? Because every data is different, and every time whatever data you are adding, it is actually accumulating knowledge about yourself, your personal self, and then the prediction becomes more and more accurate. So how many times you think is the generally?
I like 2 or 3 good cycles where you're like, okay, it all looked good. I can kind of check that one off the list as, yeah, it's good. But if you feel like, it's been a while since you checked, you're getting a little bit older, or you had a major stressor, you were sick, you moved, death in the family, just any like major stress, check again. I've realized that women can start off beautiful, nice, and everything's perfect. But then like during that process of infertility and getting the negative test, that mental stressors come back and affect the hormones and cause the hormones to be imbalanced and throws off that system that now they do have an infertility issue possibly that they didn't have before. And so, I personally like women to check every single cycle because each cycle is its own thing. But, especially the cycles that you're going to, cycle before you inseminate, absolutely, because you want to make sure everything's good because you spent a lot of your resources finding the right donor. So
yeah, absolutely. Especially in the donor conceived families, they really put a lot of efforts into coordinating with the donor for the timing and then finally going through. So I think this kind of insights really, really increase your chance to, get pregnant because you have like, you know what exactly is going on. Uh, Instead of like you put a lot of money and you don't know what is going on. So one last question about this entire women thing, and then we'll go to male, is if you can let us know more about that over. It's like I'm really curious. How do people know that? Do they have enough? How does that test exactly work?
Yeah, so our test for ovarian reserve measures a hormone called FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone. That is the hormone that's released from your brain that tells your ovaries it's time to make and develop an egg and to ovulate. And so every month it sends out a signal, says, okay, it's time to ovulate, makes the next egg. As your ovarian reserve goes from a lot of eggs to not as many eggs, the brain kind of has to yell louder to the ovaries, like, hey, hurry up, like make us an egg. And so you'll see the FSH level go up as your egg count decreases. And so if you have a really high FSH level above 10, so anything under 10 is normal. Good. If it's above 10, it means that it's diminishing. A level of 25 is considered menopausal, meaning you're like either in menopause or very, very close to menopause when it reaches 25. Typically if you're in like the 13, 15 range, that's like, okay, we have to start thinking about having less eggs left. And so we measure FSH. If it remains high, that means your ovary's just not responding. Think about, yelling at your dog. They're not responding. You gotta keep yelling and yelling and yelling. And then the other pattern we'd like to see is if it is high, but it starts to go down, we're like, okay, good. The ovary's responding. We're making eggs. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing. That's less of a risk than if it just did nothing. So those are two really good things. So we'll tell you, is it normal? Is it diminishing? Or is it diminished? So you get kind of three, like, red, yellow, green type of things. The other thing that you need to note about ovarian reserve is even if you have a low ovarian reserve, it doesn't mean you can't conceive if you are still releasing eggs. It just means you might have less time left. And so a woman with diminished ovarian reserve at 35 versus a woman with normal ovarian reserve at 35 with all other factors will have the equal amount of chance to conceive that cycle as another. But the woman who's that low ovarian reserve at 35 might go into menopause at 40. Whereas the woman that had normal ovarian reserve might be 50 till she goes into menopause. So it's just that timeline could be a little bit shorter. That's why I said at the beginning where, the biggest factor is what's your age and how many children do you want? So you can kind of understand, should I go straight to the specialist and increase my chances the highest? Should I not waste my time on home tests because I just don't have the eggs anymore? So yeah, age and kind of your family dynamics are the two most important factors in this.
I think now this is like a circle. Now we know everything about from the beginning to the end. Now let's move to the male side of the thing. So from the science perspective, what all kind of things we should see in the male fertility, and what kind of tests we can do at home, and what we have developed.
Yeah. So everyone says, it takes one sperm. It's not true. It takes a lot of them. One of them will make it, but it takes a lot of them. And that's because I'm going to go back to my uterus, right? So this is the uterus. Down here would be like the cervix. And so either if you're having intercourse or you're inseminating, the sperm, at least at home, if you're inseminating at home, the sperm is going to be deposited right at the bottom of the cervix. That sperm has to go a long way to meet the egg where it's going to fertilize it. The egg doesn't come down to here. That sperm has to swim and survive this whole time in order to meet the egg. And so it just takes a lot. So the most important factors are the number of sperm, the count, and the motility. Can they swim in a forward motion? Because they have a lot of swimming to do. And so, count and motility are the biggest factors. And then you get into like the pH, the morphology. Does it have a tail? Is it the DNA fragmented? All these other factors. I'm not saying they're not important, but they're less important than the number and the count, right? Like the motility. And so if you're doing natural conception or you're using an at-home donor, those are the two most important factors to do. If you're considering whether you should do an IUI, which is intrauterine insemination, so that is a catheter that goes in your uterus and deposits more closer up here, because it's a less quality sperm. It has to swim less, or there's a lot less of them to get through that environment versus IVF, which, an IUI is $2,000, $3,000. IVF is $20,000, $30,000. Knowing the morphology, the DNA fragmentation are very, very important. And they can distinguish between, do you need IVF or can you do IUI? And so it really depends on where in that journey that you are at that particular moment in time and how much testing you need. But we have the at-home sperm tests, so they look like that. And inside is just a little microscope.
This is my favorite part. It's very cute.
Yes, it's so cute.
It's a small microscope. Can you guys imagine? It's a microscope.
Yeah, so they collect their little sample in this cup. Everything's done at home. And then there's a little slide in here that looks like that. It's just a little microscope slide and it sticks in the side here. And then you wait like 10, 15 minutes. And then in your app, you see a video of your, the sample sperm moving. And then you get a score and you get metrics like the volume, the motile sperm, the total count, all those things so that you can really see what's going on. The reason I love this, there's several reasons, but the biggest one is it gives men their equal part in this. Women will blame themselves that I didn't get the timing, I didn't track my ovulation, it's my hormones, it's this and that, it's something I ate, whatever, when it's one sperm and one egg have to meet to create an embryo. And they just don't like to do it because they don't want to go to the clinic and they don't want to sit on the gross chair and read the disgusting magazine when the nurses are out. It's completely at home. There's no sending samples. If you get a bad result, you don't have to share it with anybody. Nobody knows, And so it increases compliance and it makes it fun. Honestly, getting to, oh wow, I get to see this video is so cool. Like, you get to see it together and look at how cool this stuff is. Because a lot of is male factor infertility, and we just don't know.
Yeah.
I also love the microscope because it does the motility, whereas a lot of the other tests that you would get on the internet, it just tells you the count. I mean, they could all be dead. They could be swimming in circles or not having like forward motility, which, like we said, is really important for them to swim to go fertilize the egg.
So, what is healthy amount when it comes to count and what kind of motility people should look at?
Yeah, so with both the male side and the female side, we score things. So nothing's ever yes or no, black or white. It's always, what gradation. So we, just like you would score a test, you get scores. So with the man's side, it's called a Yo score, and it's from 0 to 100. And anything under 10 is clinically a low sperm count. And that is 6 million motile sperm per mil is the clinical definition of having not enough sperm. But ideally, you want that number as high as possible. And so what the score does is say, if you get a score of 20, that means that you have more than 20% of men that have fathered children, which means that, yes, what people have fathered children with sperm counts of 20. 20% of them have. Like, you're better than 20% of the people that did. Whereas if you got an 80% or a Yo score of 80, that means your level is higher than 80% of men that have fathered children. That means you have a higher, likelihood of fathering a child because you just have more motile sperm. 40
like motility. So does your kit also tell us what kind of motility do they have? Like, what is the range of motility and like how good is the swimmer?
Yeah, I mean, it tracks forward motility. So there's different types of motility. There's like, circling, like that kind of thing. And then there's the forward motility. And so you want a certain percentage to them to have forward motility.
So I also know that the sperm quality and quantity varies. So what is the good time of testing this and how often do you need to test it?
Yeah. Quality versus quantity is important across females and males, not just males. And so you don't just want a bunch of sperm, you want high quality ones. And so the ones that are high quality are the ones that are moving forward. On the female side, you don't want to just ovulate, you want to have a high quality ovulation, a really healthy ovulation. And so, if you have enough progesterone produced after ovulation that supports a healthy uterine environment, you have a really good ovulation, right? And so that's where we kind of think about quantity versus quality. Same thing with eggs. You can have a lot of eggs, but if they're very damaged, then you're going to have poor egg quality. It's going to make it harder to conceive. Quality and quantity are important across everything in fertility.
So tell me one thing, just like we track hormones in female, do we need to track any hormone in male?
If they are not producing good quality sperm, then you have to understand the underlying cause, and so that could be low testosterone. The same hormone signals that go from the brain to tell the ovaries to work do the same thing in the male. So you can measure LH levels and FSH levels in a male to see if there's something. There could be a genetic issue, there could be a blockage, and so I think, if you have good, it's kind of like, ovulation. Like if you have a good ovulation and you're producing the hormones, like you don't have to go and do more testing. But if you're not producing hormones, you're not ovulating, you're not producing sperm, you got to go do more testing and understand why. What's the problem? And then do more testing. Yeah, I remember what it was. So you asked me how many times you should test, right? Is it
Yeah.
like, oh, you just
Yeah.
test
Oh, yeah.
one time and it's fine? It's like, no. Sperm regenerate every 3 to 4 months. It's constantly going. So a sperm to go from like, baby sperm to the sperm with the tail that's getting secreted out in the ejaculate takes about 3 to 4 months to get through that process. And so if there's a low sperm count, then lifestyle changes like boxers instead of briefs, not riding your bike as much, not putting your computer on your lap, taking male supplement vitamins that have zinc and lutein and B vitamins, not smoking or drinking, those kind of things can dramatically affect the sperm count. There can also be other medications that men can take, such as Clomid, to help them kind of like kickstart that sperm process. And so track it every 2 to 3 months just to see, are there improvements increasing the sperm count. Similarly, if it was a good sperm count and you're still not conceiving and maybe you did some lifestyle changes, hey, let's check again. And so these ones, they come with actually two tests.
Okay.
I do think it's really important not to just do it once. That it's a moving target as well, and you should be testing it more often.
So just like female hormone testing, does Proov has any hormone testing things for male as well, or only the sperm test?
We don't. We partner with a male clinic that will do the additional testing if it's wanted from the couple. And so we just do the initial analysis screening. And if it comes back low, we'll refer them to this clinic that can do additional testing, hormone testing, structural testing to see if maybe there's a blockage or something like that. But it's not something that we offer.
Okay. So Amy, tell me one more thing which I'm curious about is how the hormone monitoring is different from anything which is available right now in the market.
Yeah, so we talked about before of timing.
Yeah.
And a lot of women thinking, oh, it's a timing issue. I'm going to go get a different device or measure a different hormone or whatever because it's obviously a timing issue. A lot of times it's not a timing issue. And so, there's other hormone monitors that do a really good job of finding the fertile window and the timing. But you don't get pregnant. And what Proov aims to do is look at the entire cycle and all the pieces, not just timing. Remember, an egg, a sperm, they have to meet and they have to implant before you can get a positive pregnancy test. If you're only looking at timing, you're looking at one piece of this 4-piece puzzle. Proov helps you understand the entire thing. And so the majority of women who have, if you have intercourse, if you have that capability to have intercourse every 3 days, you will hit your fertile window. You don't need any hormone monitoring or anything. But where we come in is that's typically not the issue. There's some kind of hormone imbalance. There's not enough eggs. There's not enough sperm. There's the implantation window is not healthy enough. You're not releasing an egg. And so that's where Proov steps in, and none of these other hormone testing devices do that. They're just trying to find the fertile window. I call them fancier fertile window trackers. So that's kind of how we're different. Is we analyze hormone patterns, we give report cards, we give scores, we give ratios, we give an analysis of the cycle to dig deeper and understand, hey, do I have risk factors for PCOS? Do I have risk factors for not having enough eggs? Is my estrogen to progesterone ratio not optimal? Do I have too much estrogen, not enough progesterone? Is my progesterone falling too soon? All of these things can impact our ability to conceive. And when ovulation issues and hormone issues are the leading cause of infertility, not timing issues, we need a way to track this stuff and not just fertile window timing.
Yeah, so it's like more holistic picture of what is going on in your system, and like if there is something wrong, what are those components which are like having the problem. So that is like the most value which you are providing through this holistic way of psychology.
Yep, and we tell you your fertile window too, so you get
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah. Amazing. Now I want to ask you if you can share some interesting success stories of people who were like trying, and how did it go for you? It will be great.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of success stories. Some of the most common are, I've been timing intercourse and I've been trying and it hasn't been successful. I used Proov. I realized my progesterone score was low and, helped me get a prescription, or I took supplements or did lifestyle changes to help, make more progesterone, and now I'm pregnant, I conceived, been, it always starts with like, I've been trying so long and it's not working, and same one with the male side. We've been trying and trying and trying and trying, and then we took proof showed us it was a male factor, and so we finally went out and got help. So I think the biggest theme is, don't just keep trying and think it's a timing issue. There could be a lot of other things out there. A lot of women actually think they're ovulating and they're not. So, like those ovulation tests that you were saying, that just because you get a surge and it comes back down does not mean that you're releasing an egg.
Yeah. So on that, I think I want to go back to one more question. So you said the quality also matters for females. So does Proov have anything which also figure out the quality of the egg?
So no, so there's no test for egg quality. The only test for egg quality is age. Remember I said the natural decline in fertility is like 43, 44, and that's because the quality of the eggs is so fragmented that it's almost impossible to create a healthy embryo from those eggs. So a woman can still cycle and still ovulate, release eggs until 49, 50 on average, but 43, 44 is when the genetic component, the quality of the eggs has declined so much that natural conception is really difficult to do after that 44 age. So the number one factor is age and egg quality. But you want to make sure, eat a healthy diet, whole food diet. CoQ10 has been studied to help, and it doesn't help stop the damage. It helps, or not doesn't help reverse the damage, but helps stop the damage. And so it helps.
That exactly, which helps to stop it out.
CoQ10.
CoQ10. Okay. We'll write all these things in the description because
Yeah,
sometimes
CoQ10, NAC, those are just things they're called antioxidants. They help basically the DNA repair process in your body, in your ovaries. And so like every time you have a day, you breathe, just DNA damage just happens. And there's things in your body that come around and just repair it. And as those get old, they can't repair it as well. And so things like CoQ10, NAC come and help repair it. So it helps you maintain optimal DNA longer.
Okay. So I think we have covered almost everything. But one last thing, I know you've covered everything, but if you want to summarize for anybody who is going to try to get pregnant, like just summarize like what 5 steps or what 4 steps or any advice that you want to give which will help them and also motivate.
Yeah, if I had to summarize, I would say, conception requires an egg, a sperm for them to meet and implant in the uterus. And you should know those 4 things. And if you should check your eggs, your egg count, your ovarian reserve, you should check your sperm, your motile sperm. You should make sure that they're meeting. So that's, the ovulation test, the fertile window tracking, right? You want to make sure you're timing your fertilization or insemination correctly, and then implantation. And so that is making sure you have a healthy ovulatory event, you're making enough progesterone after ovulation. So this Proov test with the sperm test, we'll do all four of those. That's, the best advice I would do is just screen before you get frustrated, before you sink time and money into something. The things that we don't screen for is we don't screen to make sure there's any like things inside your uterus or your tubes are open. So those things have to be done within a clinic setting. I will say that 80% of infertility issues are these right here.
Yeah.
And only, 15% or so are, structural issues within this environment. So I've seen a lot of people, it's not me, I don't want to spend money on this, I don't want to spend money on this. And then they're shelling out their entire savings account to go do IVF because they're so frustrated that they can't get pregnant. And so if I had to do it over again, I would start with testing. Semi opportunity to do over again was when my little sister, who's 8 years younger than me, told me she was going to get pregnant. I said, all right, you are doing this. And she got pregnant the very first cycle. And, her son is 5.5 now. And so I'm like, if anything, I've helped you not have to deal with what I went through in my life. Like, that's a win.
Yes, that's such a nice vision of the company as well. And thank you so much for like even creating this, like this baby has come out of your struggle. And now this baby is helping so many others to create babies. That's what I would like to put it that way. And I think the insights which you provided today will be very insightful for me as well, and all the people who are going to try to conceive. Now, coming to the Proov, we will be like providing you all the links in the description where you can like buy the Proov product and you'll be able to shop those Proov products. So once we like release that community page, we will also add somebody from the Proov who will be there is as an admin of that community page. So whatever question you have related to Proov, you can ask those questions in those forums where you can get the direct insight from Amy's team, and which will be like wonderful because like who can answer better than somebody who has actually gone through so much and have designed this product, right? So that is the aim. Any final comment you want to have?
I mean, it's can be tough mentally, physically, to do, and so we try to support couples as much as we possibly can. Community is a huge piece of it. We never expect anybody to be taught this in school because we're not taught any of this, but we want you to be as successful as possible and try to avoid things that you don't need to do. So no question is a dumb question, except for the one that you don't ask. So, we support women, couples on our products. We like to say hormones don't take a day off, neither do we. So we're always there to support because we've all been through this, lived through this, and we want nothing more than to prevent anybody from suffering that they don't have to.
Absolutely. Don't hesitate. Ask as many questions as possible, as Amy said. And if you need any help, we are over here. You can write to us. So once again, thank you, Amy, for joining us and bless us with so many interesting insights, which are like scientifically backed. Let's see. Do let us know if you want to have us address any other questions you want to have, and then we might have this session again. So do write in the comment and like let us know. And thank you again for joining, Amy. And thank you all for listening this. And wish you a wonderful pregnancy journey, or wherever you are in this phase of the pregnancy. All the best. So everybody, bye bye. Take care. See you again.